Can you talk a little bit about how to distinguish between bliss, happiness, and pleasure?
Yes. Most people don't distinguish happiness, pleasure, excitement, peace. They don't distinguish. So when you understand it, the difference, then you know what you want to gain. Bliss is like permanent peace, which is constant. Nothing influences it. Outside influences doesn't touch you. That is called bliss. That is our basic nature. That means our basic nature is peace all the time. Only time we get disturbed because of our senses perceive it wrong way and we interpret it. So bliss gets contaminated by influence of senses, mind, and outside influence. Pleasure, what is pleasure? Pleasure is a sensation. When senses react with sense objects, like taste with food, hearing with music, same way, all five senses come in contact with the sense object, it gives the feeling of pleasure. But pleasure ends in pain. No matter whatever pleasure, ultimately ends in pain. You eat, your stomach gets filled, then you feel the pain. You like the music, after a while music's become disturbing. So pleasure always ends in pain. Pleasure also depends upon outside objects. Outside object, outside situation can determine our pleasure. So we are dependent on outside. Pleasure subsides in time. Like pleasure of eating is the greatest with the first bite. But after a while, after you eat a little bit, you are filled, your pleasure subsides until it ends. Bliss is our own nature. So pleasure is a reflection of bliss. So bliss is the original source. From it comes to happiness, and still it comes down to pleasure. So pleasure is the lowest source of bliss. Happiness, what is happiness? Difference between happiness and pleasure. Pleasure is by senses, but happiness comes when we are in touch with other human being. For example, we have relationship with our wife, children, friends, brother, sister, with a loved one. What is different than pleasure is exchange of prana. So we get greater happiness with association with person than association with things. So happiness comes with association with person. But again, happiness ends in unhappiness because the person doesn't behave the way you want. That happiness ends into unhappiness. The friend becomes a foe. So all this keep on changing. But it is much superior than pleasure because people have pets. Pets again give you contact. So this is the exchange of energy. So we love other person because that exchange of energy awakens the spark of bliss within us. So bliss, shadow of bliss or a spark of bliss is happiness. How can we see that happiness comes from exchange of energy? Just like a loved one dies, what do? You bury them or cremate them. You don't hold on to them because their physical being doesn't give pleasure. Their physical being gives pleasure because there is prana. And with prana, that is the exchange. So all the relationship give us greater happiness. So bliss is our basic source that is constant. It doesn't diminish regardless of happiness or unhappiness, regardless of pleasure or pain, excitement or depression. It never changes, because bliss is our basic nature. Ananda means bliss. It is constant. It doesn't need anything from outside, but because of ananda we find happiness and pleasure. So scripture says we love our loved ones and we love things because self is dear to us. Self means our original nature, which is blissful. So bliss is substratum of happiness and pleasure. So what should we look for? Temporary spark of bliss or permanent spark? So if you want temporary thing, get associated with objects. If you want a little bit greater happiness, associate with friends and interaction, social interaction. If you want permanent peace, go deep within. That means meditation. Be alone with yourself. That gives the constant bliss, constant happiness.